I just got to go on like a little bit of a rant here before I get into the predictions about the way the UFC has been doing fight nights lately, and especially with these last two. Because I've got the fight nights pulled up right here on Tapology. This card this weekend, from top to bottom, is low level, low stakes garbage. I'm not saying that every fight on it is going to be bad. I think Steve Garcia, Sung Woo Choi is going to be a really fun fight, and I think Steve Garcia has a future. I think he has a brighter future than pretty much anybody else on this entire fight night, other than maybe Miranda Maverick, but she's a women's MMA fighter, so who cares? I mean, Muhammad Usman's terrible. Brian Kelleher's old. Cody Gibson, Bill Algeo, Dooho Choi on the older side as well. Neither of them championship level. Bruno Silva, not a lot of fights in the UFC. Very few fights. He only has 3. 3 fights in the UFC against low-level competition. And he's not that young for only having 3 fights. Cody Durden on the older side. Sung Woo Choi has a terrible record. Amanda Lemos, Jandiroba, nobody cares. Brad Tavares on a losing streak. He's fallen off a cliff. Jung Young Park, he's a good middleweight, but he's not ever going to be championship caliber, and we all know this. So this card, top to bottom, it's just a whole pile of nothing. It just doesn't matter, with the exception, like I said, of Steve Garcia. I do think Steve Garcia has potential to be top 10 someday. Top 10 featherweight. Probably not too much past that, but I don't know. He has potential. He has more than anybody else on the card, in my opinion. Like last week's card was actually pretty entertaining. It definitely over-delivered, but I think that pretty much any fight fan could look at last week's card and at least agree that there were some good fights on it. You know, we had Gene Silva, Drew Dober, which was great looking back at it, but even before the fights happened, I think most of us could have agreed that was a good fight. That was a really good fight. Should have been the main event, to be honest. Charles Johnson versus Joshua Van. I think most of us were excited for that fight, especially those of us that were really looking forward to Joshua Van's rise up the division. Thank you, Charles Johnson, for stopping that one. That's another new prospect down the drain. Joshua Van's really young. He's only 22. He still has a bright future, I'm sure. And Charles Johnson looked great in that fight. So that was a great one. Montel Jackson getting that super quick, like 18-second KO over Damon Blackshear. You know, there was some good fights on that card, and we knew that going into it. The main event wasn't good. But the card overall was fine and ended up playing out pretty well. I didn't even watch the main event, I'll be honest. I tuned out at that point. I just don't care. And you can call me a casual for that all you want. I didn't care. I watched the highlights after. I don't understand what the UFC is thinking when they put these cards together. They have to know, or at least have an idea of what fans want. They've got to have some... I'm sure they get an idea of how many people are watching these fight nights and when people stop watching, because I'm sure I'm not the only person that decided to tune out as soon as the main event kicked on. And even on social media and on YouTube, I'm sure they have noticed people complain about these female fighting main events, these women's MMA main events. And I'm not like trying to trash all women's MMA, like all women's MMA fighters are terrible. Most of them are. I'm not trying to say that they're all horrible. I'm not trying to say that they all have boring fights. Most of them do. I'm just saying, put the best fight in the main event. Gene Silva, Drew Dober, everyone going into that card knew that was the best fight on the card. I think we all, or at least 90% of the fan base of MMA that watches regularly, was saying that's fight of the night. That's the most exciting fight on the card. It was definitely going to be one of the higher skilled fights on the card, to be honest. And it absolutely delivered. And if that was the main event, it might not make sense. Neither of them are ranked in the top 15. Neither of them are huge names, but I think Drew Dober is big enough that Drew Dober would be a better fighter to have in the main event than Tracy Cortez. What does Tracy Cortez bring to the table? Nothing. Tracy Cortez's only attribute is that she kind of looks like a woman, something that most female fighters don't have. Jandiroba would have absolutely been better than Tracy Cortez. Jean Silva is a lot more fun to watch than Rose Namajunas. I know Rose Namajunas has like a pretty big name for women's MMA, but how much of us really care about watching her fight? Should have been the co-main. Jean Silva Jandiroba should have been the main event. And even on this card, if I was in charge of the UFC, I'd rather have Brad Tavares, Jung Young Park in the main event than Amanda Lemos versus Verna Jandiroba. Like, nobody wants to see this fight. Who cares about it? Yeah, okay, I'll stop ranting now. Let's just get into the prediction video. Starting with the first fight on the main card. I'm just going to do the main card because I don't have all day. We got Doo Ho Choi versus Bill Algeo. I'm starting from the lower end of the main card, working my way up. Doo Ho Choi versus Bill Algeo. I'm a little torn on this one, but I think I'm going to go Bill Algeo. Doo Ho Choi, he's on like a 3-fight losing streak if you don't include his last fight, which was a draw against Kyle Nelson. And he was winning the fight. I think most would agree he was winning that fight up to the end, but he got brutally knocked out by Jeremy Stevens. He's finished by Charles Jourdain, and that just doesn't look good because Charles Jourdain since then hasn't really shown to have that much actual power in his hands, and I think that it's because of that war with Cub Swanson. I'm sure most people could agree. Anybody that saw that fight, which I assume most people have at this point, that fight was crazy. Doo Ho Choi, Cub Swanson, he took a ton of damage in that fight. The dude's a warrior. He's gritty. He'll slug it out with you. He's fun to watch. But I think he's taken a lot of damage. And going up against Bill Algeo is another guy that's just really tough. He'll keep coming after you. He's okay with getting into a scrap, same as Doo Ho Choi, but I feel like he's had success against higher level competition. He's also had his fair share of losses. He actually lost to Kyle Nelson by TKO, whereas Doo Ho Choi went to a draw with Kyle Nelson, so there is that. But Bill Algeo was able to get a win over Alexander Hernandez, which I don't rate too highly. I think Alexander Hernandez is a good fighter. He's got skill, but he does kind of break as the fight goes on. So it's not the best win, but it's not bad. He has a win over Herbert Burns, who, again, kind of a breakable dude. Herbert Burns is sort of the runt of the litter in the Burns family. Gilbert Burns is the Chad. Herbert is the disappointment. But he has a win over Joe Anderson Brito. Bill Algeo does, and that's a good win. I think that and honestly the Alexander Hernandez win probably better than any win that Doo Ho Choi has. He just doesn't really have any super good wins. I think Doo Ho Choi is kind of known for his awesome fight against Cub Swanson that he lost. And so there's that. And they're both a little bit older. I can't even really give an age advantage. I believe Doo Ho Choi is 33 and Bill Algeo is like 35. So it's not that huge of an age gap. I mean, I guess around 35 is when people start to really fall off. But Doo Ho Choi is kind of made up with that age gap with damage anyways. So I'm going to go with Bill Algeo. I think he's just going to outpace, out-grit maybe you could say, Doo Ho Choi. Be less tired toward the end, push the pace on him, and get a unanimous decision, 29-28, maybe getting hurt in one of the rounds because Doo Ho Choi will land those straight punches or those tight hooks in close. I could see him cracking Bill Algeo early in the fight. I think Doo Ho Choi could get the first round and Bill Algeo maybe wears him out and gets the second two. Or the second two. 2 and 3. Winning a 29-28 decision. Moving on to Cody Durden versus Bruno Silva. This is a weird one to predict. Because from what we've seen of Bruno Silva, he seems alright. Like, he has some cool highlight knockouts, you know. He's won all of his fights with knockout recently, except one. He beat Tyson Nam by rear naked choke. So he's not bad, but his wins are over JP Buys and Victor Rodriguez. These are his UFC wins, that is. In Victor Rodriguez, he's not good. He's from Alaska, so that's kind of how I know about him, actually. He trained out of Alaska, and I live in Alaska, and I know what the competition is like here in Alaska, and it's not good. Very, very, very few good fighters will come out of Alaska for the foreseeable future. Very few ever have. The only one I can think of is Jared Cannonier and Earl Smedich. But even then, Jared Cannonier, when he was training in Alaska, he was a heavyweight and he wasn't good. He didn't get good until he switched to training down in the lower states. When he was training in Alaska, he was just kind of a fat heavyweight, and he was not the Jared Cannonier we know now. So my point is, basically, that was kind of a weird rambling thing there. Victor Rodriguez, not a good win. He doesn't, Bruno Silva made him look like an amateur, but that's because he actually was an amateur. And the other one, JP Buys, super chinny and just not a great fighter either. So that's kind of my problem with picking Bruno Silva in this fight. He's looked good, but against who is kind of my problem. Like, who have you really beat? Whereas Cody Durden, even though he's coming off of a loss to Tagir Ulanbekov, that's not a terrible loss to have. Tagir Ulanbekov's a really good fighter, and outside of that, he's beat Charles Johnson just a couple fights ago, and the way Charles Johnson's looked recently, that's a great win, and that win alone pushes me to picking Cody Durden. But he's also, he's got a win over Jake Hadley, decision, Charles Johnson, decision. He also beat JP Buys by KO, just like Bruno Silva did. So there's that. But it's mostly that Charles Johnson win. The way Charles Johnson looked against Joshua Van, it's like, if Cody Durden is able to beat him, I'm going to have to pick him to beat Bruno Silva, but we don't know enough about Bruno Silva, so he might go out there and smoke Cody Durden, and there was just no way to predict that because we don't know enough about him. But yeah, I'm going to go with Cody Durden. Next fight on the card is Kurt Holobaugh versus Kanan Krzyzewski. These names, man, I'm an American. These are hard. Kurt Holobaugh's also an American, but anyways, I'm not going to pick Kurt Holobaugh. He just hasn't beat anybody good. That's my main problem with him. He had some good wins on The Ultimate Fighter, but when he's actually in the UFC, his actual UFC fights is pretty much all losses. Knocked out by Harney Barcelos, submitted by Shane Burgos. He gets beat by Thiago Moises. He gets beat by Trey Ogden. That's not a great look. Fought on The Ultimate Fighter, and he looked all right, but the problem is The Ultimate Fighter nowadays is sort of a joke. Not many good fighters actually come out of The Ultimate Fighter anymore. I don't know if anybody actually takes that show seriously anymore. I feel like all the good fighters that get in the UFC now are from Dana White's Contender Series, and even then, it's not like all of them are super great. But The Ultimate Fighter, those guys just not great, yeah. It's hard to go with Kurt Holobaugh because he just doesn't win. It sounds stupid, but he just doesn't. And he's not super impressive in any of his fights. He doesn't do anything that's like wows you. And yeah, he lost to Arne Basalis and Shane Burgos. That's at featherweight, And then losing Thiago Moises. These are all good fighters, I will say. Barcelos, Burgos, Thiago Moises, these are all good fighters. And they're not the worst names to lose to. Trey Ogden, though, that's not a great name to lose to. But on the other side, Kanan Krzyzewski, he beat Adriano Martins, and that guy beat Islam Makhachev. So he's basically the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world on paper, Anthony Smith style. Outside of that, though, he's on a one-fight losing streak. Before that, he was on a pretty big win streak. He has a good record. Gets, lots of finishes. He was finished by Elvis Brenner, but Elvis Brenner's a beast, as we figured out. Elvis Brenner, he finished Guram Kutateledze, and that at the time seemed really impressive. Now, it's kind of hard to say if we were all just super overhyping Guram Kutateledze because of his fight with Damir Ismagulov and because of their names, I guess. But Guram looked really good, on the way up. He looked really good against Damir Ismagulov. They both did. Elvis Brenner shut that down. So I don't really have a problem with him losing to Elvis Brenner, and outside of that, I just feel like he's more consistent than Kurt Holobaugh. So I'm going to go with Kanan Krzyzewski. to get the job done. And I think I'm going to go with KO. I'm thinking like round 2 KO. I just think Kuralaba is kind of susceptible to getting finished. And Kanan Krajewski gets finishes a lot, so I'm going to go with him. Moving on, Steve Garcia versus Sung Woo Choi. I think this is probably the easiest fight on this card to predict. Honestly, I'm going Steve Garcia. I just don't know how anybody could pick Sung Woo Choi in like any fight at this point. The only way to pick Sung Woo Choi is if he's fighting a guy that can't hit hard at all. He basically had to fight like an opponent with no arms and no legs, and then maybe I'd pick him to win. I know that's kind of messed up, but like he's so chinny. He gets hurt in every fight he has, and he got knocked out by Michael Trezano, man. He got dropped, I want to say, 2 or 3 times in that fight. Lost to Josh Kalibau. He lost to Alex Caceres, got submitted in that fight. He was looking all right in the Alex Caceres fight, but still not great. Lost to Gavin Tucker. Dude just loses and loses and loses. He's not even like a lose 1, win 1 fighter. He's like a lose 3 or lose 2, win 1. And he didn't used to be like that. He's 11-6. That's just not good. Whereas Steve Garcia has looked pretty sweet lately, especially in his last fight against Melquizael Costa. I remember that fight really shocked me going into it. I think I probably wasn't the only one when Melquizael Costa came in on short notice for his UFC debut against Thiago Moises and like gave himself a good showing. A bunch of us were like, "Oh, this guy's he's gonna be something special. He's gonna be really solid." Because if that was him on short notice, like super short notice in his debut, like he's a great fighter. Steve Garcia smoked him. He just completely outstruck him and finished him. No problem in that fight. He had almost no adversity whatsoever. The dude hits hard. He's got clean hands. His striking is really sharp. Steve Garcia, that is. And if you hit hard and have sharp striking against Sung Woo Choi, I have to pick you at this point in Sung Woo Choi's career. If he's getting knocked out by Michael Trezano, who does not have sharp striking at all, I'm going to pick Steve Garcia to knock him out in the first round. Like, I don't think it's going to take long at all. I'm thinking early first. Like, within the first 2 minutes. Be a couple of exchanges. Sung Woo Choi's going to get hit. He's going to get stung. He's going to make that kind of angry face that he makes whenever he gets hit. Although it's almost like pouty. He almost looks pouty when he gets dropped. It's kind of weird. I'm probably being racist because he's Asian, but he looks kind of pouty when he gets dropped. I'm just being honest. He's going to make that weird face. He's going to get dropped more than once, and then he'll get finished. Like, second or third time he goes down, Steve Garcia is going to jump on him, ground and pound TKO. Early in the first. That's my prediction for that fight. Moving on with the card, Jung Young Park versus Brad Tavares. Yeah, when I started this video, I was going to pick Jung Young Park. I still think I'm going to. Jung Young Park, I'm not like crazy impressed by. He lost his last fight to Andre Muniz. It was a competitive fight, and Andre Muniz is not a bad fighter, and Jung Young Park kind of got controlled for the most part. My problem is Jung Young Park he's a grappler for the most part. He got out-grappled by Andre Muniz, which isn't the worst thing ever. But he did. He got out-grappled by Andre Muniz. He himself is a grappler. Brad Tavares is known for having great takedown defense and being a great anti-wrestler. My problem with picking Tavares, and the reason I was leaning toward Jung Young Park. These Asian names, dude. The reason I was leaning toward Jung Young Park is because Brad Tavares, I feel like he's just fallen off really bad lately. Losing Dricus wasn't a big deal. Dricus is the champion now. He took a lot of damage in that fight, though, and it showed in his next fight against Bruno Silva, where he got finished in that one. He scraped by a win against Chris Weidman. That's the one. That's kind of the main fight that makes me not want to pick Brad Tavares. He got a decision win over Chris Weidman when Chris Weidman was coming back from a nasty leg break. Had been off for a long time and is an old man. And Brad Tavares did not beat him as decisively as he should have, is all I'll say. And I know Chris Weidman went on to beat Bruno Silva with the 1-2 eye poke, and he was honestly looking good in that fight. He was outstriking Bruno Silva, and Bruno Silva knocked out Brad Tavares. But Brad Tavares, beats Chris Weidman by decision. So MMA doesn't make sense. I'm gonna go with Jung Young Park. Okay, I'm just gonna go with that. Brad Tavares, like I said, lost to Dricus, took a lot of damage. I mean, his face was covered in blood by the end of that fight. I think his hair was like pink with blood because he dyed it blonde. Whenever guys dye their hair blonde, their hair turns pink when they start bleeding a bunch. He gets knocked out by Bruno Silva. He's been knocked out by Gregory Rodriguez. So his brain can't be okay. And he's getting older. I know Brad Tavares doesn't look old. He looks like a young dude, and he looks really strong. He looks like he would hit really hard, but he doesn't. The dude has like no finishing ability whatsoever, and he doesn't have any killer instinct. He doesn't have a lot of pop on his shots, which you'd think he would. He doesn't seem to be able to muscle people around like crazy, which you think he would be able to. It's just weird. Brad Tavares is built like a guy that would be the perfect fighter. He's built like the main character in a really crappy like B movie about fighting. He looks like he could be the main character in a Never Back Down movie, but he doesn't fight like one. I'm going Jung Young Park. All right, main event. Let's get this over with. So we got the main event again: Amanda Lemos versus Verna Jandiroba. I feel like Amanda Lemos should win. I can't pick Verna Jandiroba. Part of me wants to, but I can't, and I won't. I am going to pick Amanda Lemos. I'm going to pick Amanda Lemos to get a finish, even though Jandiroba's never been finished. I'm picking Amanda Lemos to finish I'm picking Amanda Lemos to finish Verna Jandiroba at some point in the fight. I'm not going to pick a round because it's women's MMA. It's a coin toss, man. Just pick whoever you want. Don't bet on it. I don't know. No, but for real, Amanda Lemos, I think she's way better on the feet. She has like at least some skill on the feet. She hits hard for a women's MMA fighter. You know, was able to destroy Mackenzie Dern, beat Marina Rodriguez, even though it wasn't a great stoppage. I remember everybody complaining about that when it happened. It was a really bad stoppage. Beat Michelle Waterson-Gomez, but beat Angela Hill. She's kind of beat some of the who's who of the women's divisions. The problem with picking her in this fight, the only thing that made me maybe think about picking Verna Jandiroba is that Amanda Lemos has been showed levels in the grappling. But, I mean, she was able to survive Mackenzie Dern. That's because Mackenzie Dern can't strike. But Verna Jandiroba got outstruck by Mackenzie Dern and lost. And she lost to Amanda Ribas. And she lost to Carla Esparza. I can't pick Verna Jandiroba. She has a great record for a women's MMA fighter on paper. 20-3 is great for women's MMA. It's a really good women's MMA record. But when your three losses are Amanda Ribas, Mackenzie Dern on the feet, and Carla Esparza, I will not pick you to win anything. So yeah, going with Amanda Lemos by finish. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you didn't, then I'm sorry. You can hit the dislike button if you want. Please don't. Let me know what you think about the card in the comments below if you care to. I imagine most of you, if any of you comment, you're just going to tell me that this card sucks. Either that or you're going to call me a casual for saying that this card sucks. Stop lying to yourself. You know it sucks. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you guys later. Goodbye.